Hey everyone, welcome back to the lab. In this video, we're going to be talking about how Meta runs blameless postmortems at scale. Efficient incident reviews without the politics and the drama that comes with it for a product org of about 30,000. So I worked at Instagram for 3.5 years. In that time, I ran over 50 incidents called SEVs and participated in far more from inception to post-mortem. Since then, I've gone on to several other roles, from startup software engineer to solo founder to working as a software engineer at a scale-up where I am now. And during this time, I've observed how engineering processes work, from planning to building to incident response at each of these different roles. It's made me appreciate Meta's approach to postmortems even more for its simplicity and effectiveness. So in this post, I'm going to share the postmortem process that we use to effectively respond to incidents and prevent them from happening again, without the politics and drama. So first, let's talk about blameless postmortems. First off, blameless postmortems are table stakes for effective problem solving. If you are in a blame-first culture, your org is not and cannot be effective. By definition. This is simply because problem solving requires taking risks. It requires the ability to create, share, and test ideas that may at first seem illogical. Because, if they're illogical, we would have already solved it. If you cannot do that, then you will be stuck in the status quo. And guess what? The status quo is what got you to this incident in the first place. Not changing it is akin to asking it to happen again. So, blameless postmortems are good. They allow people to bring their whole self, and thus their whole brain, to the table to solve the problem at hand. And if the most important thing is actually solving the problem, we want to make an environment and an incentive structure to allow them to solve it the best they can. Plus, this makes the working culture that much better. So you're going to improve how long people actually want to stay at your company. This has, obviously a lot of different effects like, expertise, knowledge gain, mentorship, the amount of work people are willing to put in. So I really think this is table stakes for effective problem solving, but also effective company building. If you run a company in a different way, I will not work for you. I would recommend other people not work for you. That is just not an effective way to do things, end rant. Okay, Meta's postmortem process. So Meta is a planet scale company, and most orgs are not planet scale. So I want to caveat that many of their processes are built to scale well beyond what most orgs need. That said, I still think this is a useful case study of a simple scalable system. I think you can use this at planet scale, but it also works very well at small scale as well. So I want to give a kind of high level view of the process and how it kind of fits into an org before we go into the specifics of postmortem. Okay, first let's talk about kind of the timeline of an incident, how that is actually done, because we need that context before we can talk about reviewing that thing happening. So from a very high level, basically, an incident, we called it a SEV at Meta. It happens, right? Something breaks, whatever. Then the team, when they realize that it's happened, they're going to create an incident in a SEV tool. At Meta, they have custom software that's like the SEV tool. It's got like a URL for the SEV, unique identifier, easily shareable. And this is going to serve as like the single source of truth for the SEV, where you can do things like, what's the current status of this thing? Who is involved in this? Who do we need to escalate to, and how do we do that? You can call them, you can text them, you can message them through the tool. You can send notifications out to everyone who's watching this. It'll have timelines and descriptions of what's happened so far. And you can also do some discussion on here, both in the tool, and it can link out to another chat for kind of faster, more synchronous communication. What I've seen in most other orgs is that they tend to just use Slack to do kind of incident response and communication, which works fine. But I think this custom software is actually really good, and I haven't really seen, something as good out in the real world. So maybe an idea for someone to build. Okay, so obviously the incident's created. That's where you're tracking everything. Then whoever's involved in this, tackles the incident. Obviously every SEV is different. So I don't know what it required to solve your specific problem, just depends. But let's say that they solve it. And then the next thing that they're going to do is they're going to update the incident tool with the report on what happened. And so, of course, the most important things are the root cause that started this, what was the impact on the business and the customer, and then the timeline from events from start to finish, which is what we'll get into very specifically in the postmortem phase. So that's what an incident is. And now let's talk about the postmortem SEV review process. And so basically the way that Meta does this at scale across their huge org and, however many things are breaking all the time is basically the highest impact SEVs are picked up in recurring meetings that they call SEV reviews. And there's many different versions of these that are running at the same time. Usually there's like a company-wide one for like the biggest things, like, if Facebook, Instagram, everything is down, then those things will definitely get picked up in the broadest one. But then there's usually also some smaller ones for orgs or like kind of domains that they've spun up because maybe it breaks a lot or it's very important. So some examples of these might be like Instagram has their own for just Instagram specific things that might not get picked up at the company-wide level, but you still want to make sure are reviewed. This might be like Facebook ads, brings in a lot of money. So they really want to be careful about their own things, but again, might not be brought up in the company-wide one. Or privacy is another great example where the impact might not affect money, but it's very, very crucial to the fabric of the company. And so they want to make sure that they get all those and solve them. And you can kind of think of this as like a little panel of reviewers, like kind of code reviewers that are doing this thing. And so you can see how it kind of scales because they just need like office hours for a set amount of time, let's say weekly or biweekly, and then they can basically catch up on the things that have happened in the past few weeks. And so it's kind of like low effort, but they can get to a lot of these incidents at scale. And so basically these sub reviews are meant to serve as additional eyes and perspectives to share knowledge of what happened and provide input on how to improve. And again, they're very similar to code reviews. And so they're typically going to include a few types of people. And so the first is like the SEV owner. And so this is the point of contact for the SEV. This is typically the person who owned the particular domain that either root caused it or they're the person that was very affected by this issue. And so they were running the SEV. It's someone who feels responsible, who has incentive to basically do these follow-ups to make sure this thing is thoroughly fixed. The next people on this call is the SEV experts. These are usually the people that are actually running this thing. Will come to most of these meetings. And so these will be like experts on incident response. Maybe they're teams that build a lot of the incident response or detection, observability, alerting tools that want to understand how things go wrong so that they can fix their tools or provide suggestions. And often some people from the overall domain that it's in that are representatives or experts there so that they can like track these things and kind of have a higher level view of things going wrong so that they can kind of move the roadmap to fix. And this is really good and useful to have all these experts here because then they can kind of provide feedback and perspectives from techniques across the org for how you can fix this very particular issue. And finally, you might have some relevant stakeholders. So these might be like owners of relevant tools, maybe similar domains that are doing the same thing somewhere else, or downstream products that were affected. So basically just anyone who kind of cares about this, either to prevent it from happening there or they're just interested in this particular area, they might come as well. And so when we think about it, it really serves as a relatively light way to ensure that, one, the incident is thoroughly understood. We didn't just like put a Band-Aid on it. We actually solved the real problem. We know what the real problem is. Ensuring that the follow-ups are created and executed to prevent it from happening again. Because, if something happens once, it will happen again. That's what a system is. And that knowledge is shared so that, other teams can learn from what happened here and they can stop it from happening in the future, either in this domain or their own domain or wherever they see it happen again. We don't want knowledge to be siloed. And so that's kind of like the idea from like a high level. Now I want to talk about what actually happens in a single postmortem. So, we have this recurring meeting, they pull people in, they have like several SEVs that they're going to review in the same time. What does one SEV review look like? Meta's incident postmortem steps. So I think the most important thing about Meta's postmortem process is the steps and categories that they go through when reviewing a SEV. I think these are important because they force people to think through the entire process of incident response to find and eliminate bottlenecks to more effectively prevent it in the future. Plus, these are steps that you can easily bring with you to your own org to improve incident response. You don't need any custom software. You don't even need this recurring meeting. You can literally just take these steps and use it in your own incident response. So to start, when we're kind of reviewing a specific SEV, we share the most important details so that everyone's on the same page. So first, an overview, a little TLDR of what happened. Then we go into impact. So what was the impact on customers in the business? And then finally, we talk about root cause. Like, why did this happen? And usually we get pretty specific here using code pointers, any kind of like data we have. Maybe we got like Datadog, or maybe we got some like weird analytics thing, use links to that stuff. And so that gets everyone on the same page of like what happened, why it happened, what was the impact on the business? And then the postmortem steps get into basically the timeline of the incident from start to fixed. And this is useful because you can then easily spot bottlenecks in the process and come up with follow-ups to improve in the future. And I think this is where most incident responses fall short, is they don't do this. And so they fix the root cause, or sometimes they fix the root cause. Often they will They will stop the root cause from happening and impacting customers, but they don't look forward to prevent this from happening again or improve their processes to make it less painful. And so I think this is really where Meta's process kind of outshines most other processes that I've seen. And so they kind of break down the timeline like this. And the idea basically is, the timeline is just start to finish. And in order to close this, any phase in them can be improved on because that changes the overall timeline. And I'll go through an example. But basically it looks like this. So we look at incident start. So when the issue started and what caused it. And this is a good way to also, just double check that root cause actually makes sense based on, does the timeline align? The next is detection. So when we detected it and how, did we have metrics on this? Were there alerts on this? Who had access to the data? Stuff like that. Then we go into escalation. So when did this issue arrive at the appropriate team and how did it get there? These are separate steps, crucially, I think, because often this takes a while. Next is mitigation. So when was the issue first mitigated and how? So what did we do to stop it? And this basically means that we stopped the bleeding. So you can imagine an incident like the business, the customer is hurt. When did we stop it from bleeding? So when did we stop it from getting worse, affecting more customers, stuff like that. The next is remediation. So when were we able to fix the issue for all affected parties? So you can imagine that sometimes the problem is going to be we are maybe setting a wrong piece of data somewhere. And so now we've affected more and more customers with this bad piece of data. So mitigation would be we're not affecting more customers. So we've stopped the bleeding, but the wound is still there. We now have this big circle of customers that are hurt already. Now we've got to remediate this by fixing them somehow. We heal the wound so that no problem happened basically. And you can imagine that sometimes this takes quite a lot longer than just stopping it from happening to more people. And then finally, there's this idea of close. So when were all of these follow-ups completed, which basically means we feel very confident with the follow-ups that this thing won't happen again. And so, on the surface, this may seem very pedantic and a lot of steps, but I can assure you from experience that this extra bit of writing and thinking often leads to ideas for simple changes that could vastly improve time to fix and thus reduce the impact of this incident on your customer. Okay, and so a simple example of this might be let's say the incident start to mitigation time took 2 days and 12 hours. So this is obviously a very long time for an incident to be going on and affecting customers. So obviously we need to mitigate faster, right? But how do we do that? So if we look at the breakdown of events and it's something like this, let's say we detected something 10 minutes after start, so we were alerted immediately. But then escalation took 2 days of bouncing around this alert to find the appropriate team that could fix this. And then mitigation took 12 hours to fix. Here mitigation is an issue. Ideally it doesn't take 12 hours to fix things, but depending on the thing, maybe that can go faster. But really escalation, 2 days of bouncing around to find the appropriate team, that seems like a huge bottleneck that should be pretty easy to solve, right? And so this might actually be the most impactful thing for us to do. Maybe tweak the code ownership, tweak the alerts, tweak the data and where it gets sent so that we can turn this from 2 days into 1 hour. And had we not done this, maybe the focus would be on mitigation, but that's actually not where, the most impact lies. And so for each of these steps, each of these parts of the timeline, really walk through, what happened? Do people agree with what you said happened? How do you know that's what actually happened? Why did it take so long? What things were missed? What steps were taken? And then based on everything that we understand there, how can we improve it in the future? Pulling from our combined experience and perspectives from the experts, the stakeholders, the people involved, stuff like that. And then the SEV owner is tasked with prioritizing and delegating the follow-ups before closing out the SEV. And then obviously we have these stakeholders that oversee all SEVs. And so what they can do at a kind of more org level is see patterns in SEVs that might be happening across domains, and they can think of roadmap items to fix this across next. So I believe reflection is a crucial part of any effective cycle, and it's a core part of my personal OS, the creation cycle. If you don't learn from what you did, you can't improve, and improving a little bit every cycle is the simple scalable system for continuous improvement. SEV reviews, like code reviews, are a relatively lightweight process that provide unbounded upside. As such, they are 3S approved in my book, and I happily recommend them to any engineering org. If you like this post, you might also like Instagram's Tech Stack Will Surprise You, my career as a software engineer so far, and if you're into startups, my Simple Scalable System to stop wasting your time on bad startup ideas. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.